Mrs. Kratza. It's an honor to have you here, as well as the MP, Mr. Kremlis, and others. Apologies if I have forgotten somebody. We would like to deeply thank you all for participating, because this work would be meaningless if we didn't have all of you to participate in that in this forum. We would just have a cup of coffee. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's very important. Let us discuss about it straight away. But let me tell you that public investment is a very important tool. Many times, states are using it to promote goals, to promote tools, to talk about circular economy, fight recession. This is a known tool since Keynes. Redistribution of income amongst the social classes or regions. It is frequently used for reasons of growth policy, for technological reasons, but also used for regional development as well. It's one of the most important tools through which regional development can be promoted and convergence between regions, that is, mitigate gaps. Here, I read a study by Mr. Psycharis saying that in our country, public investment contributes to regional development, but not to convergence. We have many questions that could puzzle us. I read a very recent one, a totally new report by the OECD, talking about the necessary public investment to face the COVID-19 crisis. There is a big challenge lying ahead in different states to face crisis. The majority of states are using the classical tools of the budgetary and monetary policy. And budgetary policy, we do include direct measures of support, jobs, income, unemployed people, etc. This is a burden to the budget, but this would be very difficult for the state to get it back. That is why we need a mixture that is support to the businesses and the society. Businesses are very important not to destroy our productive people, but on the other hand, it is an opportunity to plan our public investment so that we can promote the different transformation of our economy, promote these public investment, for instance, digital economy, infrastructure, HR, in different sectors where we have comparative advantages that will lay the foundation for development, and of course, classical development and networks of energy, fight climate change, transport, etc., etc. It is a golden opportunity to channel public investment in a way so that we can contribute to future development to cover our debts. The next challenge, the next big thing in the EU that cannot be financed by the central bank, it will be the debt management. Money that we're using now should have a stronger multiplier effect. For the regional development, there should be a regional multiplier, because we can give some euros to Patras, but not used for Patras. Our colleagues are going to talk about the different multiplier effects. We must take into account the regional multipliers, examine the projects that will maximize the benefit of each euro invested. We have so many specialists, practitioners, people from theory. To keep it short, let me give the floor straight away to Ms. Eleni Marianou. It's an honor for Greece in this European body to have a Greek Secretary General who is here from the Achaia region. Thank you. You have the floor, madam. There are some slides as well, in order that we can see that together. Okay, here we are. So, in my introduction, I told you that the summer forecast is showing a not that good financial landscape that we announced. Here I have the drop, minus 9.7% from Greece in 2020, with the vulnerable environment in Greece due to the monoculture we said before. So we need interventions, spatial territorial interventions to see where we need to focus investment-wise. In CPMR, in our body, we have a trend to build maps. We are building maps, and this is a problem for the Commission. We believe that when we have a map in front of us showing exactly what we are saying, it is more readable. We can see exactly where we stand. The summer provisions can be, the summer forecast can be seen here on the map. You can see that the darker is the more difficult thing. Moving on, again using maps, here we can see that there is a study. It's not that obvious, of course. Here it's better, I believe. From that point, we can see the state of play in Europe for the cohesion policy, what are the eligible territories today, and the map. Then you can see the eligible territories to what extent from the next programming period onwards. We can see that many regions, 59, can change eligibility. 46 out of the 59 are facing problems. And not just about Greece. There is this financial crisis, this COVID, etc. There are difficulties, and that is why there are differences. It means that development has become more difficult for everybody. Only 9 out of the 59 are on the rise, because the aim of cohesion is not just to get money, but it's to take less, because we can exit problem. We can solve a problem through money. This is the aim. Only now 9 out of the 59 are on the rise due to the conjunction we said before. 4, we changed category due to the change of territorial statistics. Let me talk to you about Greece. Here we can see the same logic. What is the state of play? What will be the future? State of play up to 2027. 7 regions will be downgraded by 1 class, and only 1 region will be downgraded by 2 classes, the Southern Aegean Sea. The minister said it so. The Southern Aegean Sea will lose 2 places. It became one of the worst because it suffered a lot financially. Moving on, I imagine that you can get the slides later on. You can see the different areas about Greece. Moving on, we do like the winners and the losers, because this counts in the different meetings. Everybody is here to talk about each penny, about resources and how resources will be allocated. Now you can see the comparative study on the map with different colors, red, pink, purple. You can see the percentages and the caption that I have next to that. Greece is expected to have an increase of the subsidies when it comes to cohesion by 7%, which is very important. 19 billion euros, that is. Moving on. To be more specific about negotiations, as I said before in my introduction, it's very important to see that this will happen in July and will be finalized in July, to have a program ahead. The proposal made by the president of the Council, Charles Michel, in 2018 May, it was 1.34 billion euros. May 27, 2020, that has been the proposal, the new proposal of the Commission, 1.8 billion euros, a significant increase, as Mr. Margaritis said yesterday. As I said before, there is increase in the minor programs that are here, will be here to help the recovery from COVID. What we're interested in, and I will move on with the next one, is what is the course of that? You know that there is a trilogue, the Commission, the Council, and the different reforms, not the MFF. This is yes and no. It's important to know that this trilogue has been stopped, but now this starts again. There is a delay in the legislative approach due to the pandemic. there is uncertainty about when this will start, since many of the thematic objects of the legislation that exist in this trilogue must follow a different approach. There is a difference when it comes to the EU budget. There is a broader delay that should be solved if we decide about this budget at the level of the member states. Then moving on, let me talk to you about the technical aspect that we should know about it. It talks about the European semester and cohesion policy. Cohesion policy has entered this semester. There is a more powerful connection here. To what extent there is a negotiation in member states and how they develop their program vis-à-vis what they have promised to do. And since it goes without saying that cohesion policy participates into that, there has been a connection with the European semester. In this European semester, there is the Annex D. This is a list. This is a catalog with deliverables, investment-wise, which is very important because this is about what we want to do investment-wise, what we are talking about here, what are the investment efforts that we need to take. So we believe in our body that it is very important to have this annex. But what seemed to us, how should I put it to the speaker, not that close to the local societies. It's quite macroeconomic, the way in which this is drafted. Up to now, we've seen many differentiations when it comes to different investments, etc., vis-à-vis the local needs. And then we believe that if we really have, as a name, a convergence between cohesion policy and the semester, that is the macroeconomic semester, it would be wiser to come closer to the peripheral needs and converge that with our visions in the long run and the plans in the long run according to the European semester. In a more concise way, allow me to tell you what this Annex D is about for Greece. What are the investment expectations for Greece? We can see insularity, for instance, as something included in Annex D. More SMEs, there are many in Greece, which is something of interest for our country. Sustainable urban mobility, access to jobs, and of course the macro strategy of the Adrian Aegean Sea, which is close to Western Greece, related to the whole region, Italy, and the 4 countries that are not in the EU. In a nutshell, allow me to talk to you about the Equal Transition Fund. This will enter into the common strategy. And here we have the DBs Annex, where there is a list with eligible territories vis-à-vis the object of the Fund of Equal Transition, Fair Transition. We do not know the timeline. We believe that this will be submitted at the end of 2020 and the project will be ready in 2021. The program will be a part of the program submitted. This will be a part of the submitted plan or not. This is debatable. This is under discussion with a member state. Islands. As an organization, since we are dealing with coastal and insular territories, we are the only body at the European level dealing with the role of islands. We are interested in approaching our islands in a different way throughout the European Union. That is why we do believe, or rather we tried through the European Parliament to earmark a percentage for non-urban territories, that is, territories which are not big, but also islands, a 5% of the ERDF to be used by the islands. Then we raised a thematic objective for spatial expansion, BO5. It's not just about islands, but it can also be about islands. DG Regio will launch a document about the special areas where islands could be included. This document is in delay. We hope that it's not about a political decision, but just a problem of launching something, because this will lay some foundation for cohesion policy and spatial cohesion, about which I talked to you before. Last but not least, I will be available for questions, what we are trying to do as a body from now on, because our body is a think tank and lobby. We do think what we want to do and in what way, through specific proposals in all different policies about regions. There will be specific analysis when it comes to what exists in the EU, and we really need to see to the reviewed proposal submitted by the Council. It will be a nego box, which will be launched next week by the President of the Council, Charles Michel, that will include the different proposals that could make all member states to agree upon the budget. Each time we shall analyze these new proposals and what this means according to the maps, who will win, who will lose, etc. So these proposals are analyzed in all the different projects, and we are trying to see the eligibility, because when we have new statistics, eligibility of regions changes. We need to see the latest figures by Eurostat to depict that in a proper way on the map. I will stop here, moderator, so that we can have a fruitful discussion later on. I'm here at your disposal. You have my contact details here. Thank you. Thank you very much. We shall agree that it has been a very interesting and rich in information presentation, a deep knowledge of European affairs. Let me keep the deviation lately when it comes to cohesion, the special problems in the coastal area in our country. Many times we forget that the majority of our territory is insular. So we are an insular country. Each territory has a different impact to face from COVID, especially our islands, extrovert systems, that is, where we can see our dependence from tourism. We need special actions for islands. And at last, the Article 174 of cohesion policy should be more highlighted. It should not just be a void letter into a piece of paper. Now, let us turn to something else, because the Deputy Minister is here, the Deputy Minister of Rural Development. Our country in the years to come will depend its prosperity on primary sector. We are a country of exquisite raw material, and I believe that Mr. Krekas is the best person to update us about it, about an issue where public investment traditionally skyrocketed the agricultural income in Greece many, many years ago. This contributed to our development. So, Deputy Minister, you have the floor. Thank you for being here. Good morning to everyone, and let me thank you for this honorary invitation given to me by the organizer, Mr. Louloudis, the editor of the Peloponnesos Journal, this historic journal of Achaia. I would like to thank the regional governor, my dear friend Nektaris Fermakis, with whom we will work quite hard in the period to come to bring growth in Western Greece, and of course our moderator here, our dean, who highlighted that in the next 10 years we shall talk about primary sector. Indeed, allow me to talk about this sector. And I would like to tell you that in the previous years, this was marginalized. So in the previous years, when I participated in different conferences in Athens or elsewhere, there has been a very low participation of the primary sector. They talked about energy, they talked about industry, they talked about tourism, but nothing about primary sector. When did we talk about primary sector? In 2009 and 2010. Even back then, in the previous decade, at the beginning of that crisis, there has been an issue again of primary production and how young people would come back to villages. You remember back then, go back to village, go back to the regions, cultivate the fields, produce qualitative products, etc., so that we can bring development back. I don't know if we have a look back then at this era. I don't know how many risks really contributed to that, and to what extent the primary sector was helpful to our recovery, because growth was just a story of the last few months. Why are we talking about the primary sector? Indeed, we're talking about agriculture. We're talking about the primary sector. The Greek economy 2020, can it depend on agricultural economy? Allow me to tell you two or three things about it, just for you to understand how important is the role of agricultural economy for our national economy. Today in Greece, the participation of the primary sector in GDP is double than the average of the EU. Greece participates in absolute numbers as an agricultural production, and I will elaborate on that later on. That is, the product that stops in the field and then sold is about 3.7%, when the average of the EU is less than 2%. But if we add to that the processing of agricultural goods, for instance, dairy product businesses, feta cheese, or the processing of olive oil or edible olive, we're talking about the 88% of the GDP. And if we see then the agricultural production not as the agricultural product that stops in the field, but can reach the dish of the consumer in Greece, or of a person abroad, or if it reaches the dish of a tourist in Greece, then we can talk about a participation into an industry, a participation into the national industry. Along with the tourist product, it might overcome 20 or 30%. This is how they talk about it in Italy, where export of agro-food products, that is products of the primary sector, overcome 45 billion euros per annum, whereas in Greece, similar exports are 6 billion euros per annum. These 6 billion euros are the 30% of the total exports of our country, apart from the oil byproducts. 30% consists of agro-food products. Let me tell you that more than 10% are dealing with the agri-food. I talked to you about the participation in the GDP, and let me tell you some other data that should be said. When we're talking about the environment, and I have participated in that sector in many different conferences, I remember that we must talk about the environment. We must talk about the environment only if we include the primary sector. The 80% of water used today in Greece is channeled to cultivation for irrigation purposes. Only 20% of water resources go to other uses, either in the cities or in the industry. When the 63% of water is pumped by the aquifer. Can we really talk about the environment as a main component if we neglect the quality of water? May we neglect the primary sector? No. May we talk about soil when we use 40 million stremas, that is 30% of the total Greek surface for agricultural purposes, livestock breeding, agriculture, etc., which means what type of components do we set into the soil, what type of nitrates, what type of phosphates, what type of pesticides. Can we skip the agricultural sector? Unfortunately, in our country, in the previous years, when I participated in environmental congresses, there has been no rep of that industry. Now the European Commission is here and includes into the holistic approach the famous Green Deal through the 8 different policies, harmonized policies of integrated approach for the financial support of Europe and the protection of the environment. One of these 8 policies is the policy from the field to the dish, from farm to the fork, as they are saying in Europe. The other policies are circular economy, transport, pure energy, the reuse of different goods. One of the 8 policies to face environmental issues are about the agricultural sector. This is where we include this policy. What does it say? It talks about a sustainable development in the primary sector, protecting the environment, and set some targets for 2030. What are these targets? 50% reduction of the remaining fertilizers on the soil, 50% decrease of pesticides and plant protection products, 25% increase of the cultivated plots and turn that into organic cultivations, 8% increase, 7% of land used in Europe are about organic products. We're talking about organic cultivations. A big part of that, a big part out of this 8% is about livestock breeding, and we're talking about organic livestock breeding. We have here the blessing in Greece and the tradition in Greece to have the moving livestock breeders. A big part of our livestock breeding is really organic, is truly traditional livestock breeding. Unfortunately, though, these products do not enjoy an equal value, the value that they should have into the shelf or into the dish. So what is the limit of the agri-food sector? When we're talking about 6 billion exports, Spain 49 billion, the Netherlands 92 billion euros exports. You understand the sizes. Of course, in the Netherlands we're talking about machinery as well. You understand the potential and the opportunities for Greek products. One example, in crisis, the first quarter of 2020, exports of agricultural products increased by 15% approximately. In the 2 months of COVID, many agricultural products, kiwis, apples, even strawberries, citrus, they had a record in exports, which shows that Greek products may find their place in international markets. These are key, or this opportunity should be maintained as Greece, provided that the Greek state will be close to the agricultural sector, and this may show the limit that is in existence practically. So Greek products are products that might find their way in Europe, in the international markets, provided that we shall do certain things. I'm going to talk to you about 4 pillars. First one is about the green transformation of the primary sector, the agricultural production. But how can we achieve it? We need digital transformation equally. We need at last a change in the way through which we are cultivating our fields. We cannot talk about targets in 2030. We cannot ask young people to enter production if we do not change the way through which we are cultivating, if we use obsolete ways. And let me inform you that this is what we are doing today. Today, for instance, pieces of advice in agricultural matters are given in traditional coffee houses, because Greece is one of the fewer countries in the world that has no integrated open system of agricultural advice that we are preparing right now, an open system for agricultural advice. We have agronomists, vets, scientists who have graduated from the Greek universities. They are in need of job. They have the know-how, of course. They need to follow lifelong learning, of course, and they can help all farmers on their job. Invest them in the field, not ex cathedra in the office. We are preparing that, and we shall see that shortly. We need to attract young people. This means that we must show to them the way through which they can have a worthy income. Young people will not come to work if they don't have a dignified income for their families to survive and reinvest in the job, because investment is of paramount importance. Furthermore, it takes infrastructure, as quite rightly was put by the Dean, Mr. Kotios. Western Greece, 22% only of cultivated land is possible to irrigate. Out of the 48,000 stremas, 120 or 130,000 can be irrigated. And how can this be irrigated, and in what way? Open channels, through channels constructed by the very known benefactors of the last 50 years. It takes here some serious investment, and I'm going to elaborate on that later on. At the end of the day, we are producing products. Why? Greek products, are they better? Yes, they are better. Yes, they have better characteristics. We have a blessed homeland. Even today, I would like to tell you that we have fewer or much fewer use of fertilizers and pesticides vis-a-vis the EU average. Why? Because we have better soil, richer soil, and we have better environmental conditions, no moisture, no humidity, no rain when not needed. As a result, we don't need so many plant protection products. Who knows that the Greek products are better than respective similar products than our competitors in Italy, Spain, the Netherlands, or outside the EU. Very few people know about it. Why? Because we have not managed to give an identity to our products, and we have not managed to bring along with the product this identity from the very beginning of the production until it goes to the dish. So it takes brand identity. I'm talking about traceability. In other words, an identity to the product that will be published, but also this will be communicated to the consumers. This brand is guaranteed throughout the whole chain of production or throughout the supply chain. We don't have either an integrated traceability system. I come from the trade world, so I see many friends with you. Mr. Rezos, for instance, who is a expert of commercial products. He's a specialist in raw materials. This is an effort that he's doing alone. Of course, using some tools, but too much effort so that he can truly invest. He's a specialist in sea buckthorn. What are we doing as a government? For what reason the primary sector, we must also talk about regional development? Let me give you one example. In the present programming period, 46,000 beneficiaries, 600 million euros will be gotten for investment projects or financial support through the strand of the primary sector development of the second pillar. What does this mean? 600 million that are not channeled in different investments, but they go to 40 or 50,000 beneficiaries. What do I mean by that? Money given through the program, through the agricultural fund, go to many people, which means a quick dissemination to the society, to the citizens. Likewise, there is a quick benefit. What are we doing as a government? And let me come to the end. Let me tell you that we are in a crucial crossroad. Why am I saying so? Because this is the end of the previous programming period in the NSRF and in the Agricultural Fund, and then also in the previous CAP period, 2014-2020, we shall enter 2021-2027. There has been also the COVID story. 20 billion euro for the next period NSRF, almost 6 billion euros from the rural development program of the next programming period. We have another 2-3 billion to add to that for the next 3 years that could be leveraged, 26 billion plus 30 billion by the recovery fund, which means 60 billion euros, which should be planned today. They should become mature tomorrow. And from now on, we must start implementation. What have we delivered in our ministry without making any political comment? When it comes to maturities, few things by our predecessors, I would say. Much job has been done. And the same story can be repeated in the regional governments, I'm pretty sure. And Mrs. Rodikrata is going to elaborate on that later on. I don't know what the regional governors found from their predecessors. For the last 12 months, we are trying to overcome inertia, stagnation, and the swamp of the public administration. Let me tell you one thing by way of conclusion. From 2014 up to 2019, there has been no bid for no one new project of agricultural infrastructure, not even one project. They included into the agricultural development program 2 projects on July 2nd, 2019. On July 7th, there was elections. We, in 12 months, we have already drafted in our budget 3 projects of 35 million euros. The previous week, we saw the different quotes. We saw a participation of 40 different companies for these 3 projects. 4 agricultural infrastructure projects are on the air right now, this week. We're talking about 7 projects of a total value of 80 million euros. And we're talking about another 300 million euros until the end of the month, until the end of the year, rather. For the remaining years of our mandate, we will leverage more than 1.2 billion euros invested in the primary sector. 600 million in processing, 1.2 billion euro. That will be very important. 1.2 billion for improvement plans, more than 10,000 beneficiaries, 200 million for leader after the commitment we had to help the regions and regional development. And we agreed in cooperation with the Ministry of Development, a very good cooperation with Dimitris Skalkos and Adanis Georgiadis and Giannis Tsakidis, we sent a demand to the European Commission to allow to us to integrate investments of the primary sector that amount more than 500,000 euros into the investment law of the Ministry of Development, not rural development, which means greenhouses, an investment of many million euros. So the Ministry of Development gave a solution. They can get a part of the pie so that we can talk about innovative investments. The purpose here is to have investments in the agricultural field, not only at the level of the HR, but also at the level of the capital, which needs highly remunerated scientific personnel. Since I'm talking about half an hour, and the moderator is quite grumpy, a last thing, national plan for recovery of the agro-environmental infrastructure. The Prime Minister himself has set up a committee for this plan. Members are the 6 Secretary Generals of the co-competent ministries and Dimitris Skalkos. For the first time, there will be a monthly plan when it comes to irrigation, closed irrigation, smart irrigation infrastructure, and plans to collect rainwater throughout Greece, not in a fragmented way, not as if we were building a dam without water, no. We have many dams for artificial lakes, but this water is not used for agricultural purposes. This changes now. In cooperation with the European Investment Bank, we shall finance this project, and we will move on for the next day in Greece, a country that will produce more. Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Thank you for that. The organizers told me that each speaker has 8 minutes, but this presentation can be so holistic. And since we're talking about an agricultural area, I believe that the strategy that we heard, the directions about smart farming, extroversion, plus the different proposals heard and the possibilities that exist out there, I believe that this was very interesting, Minister, and there was an optimistic tone. There is perspective. Okay, now, quite shortly, let us move on with Mr. Skalkos. They told me that in 1 hour we'll have the next session. It's not, the blame should not be put on us, though. We have Secretary General Mr. Skalkos with us, who is competent on person on NSRF and public investment. Upon the law 4635 of 2019, for the first time there is an order set in public investment. We are talking about the national plan when it comes to the use of different resources, public investment process. We have the sectoral programs in order to harmonize our strategies, NSRF combined to the different plans. These are the main two tools, NSRF, and then we shall have more things in the next period to enhance the classical public investment and harmonize that with the NSRF in order to avoid fragmented initiatives or efforts. Mr. Skalkos, please, you have the floor. Please, 8 minutes top, or the professors, or if not, the professors will not have time later on to address the audience. Thank you. Okay, I will be very brief, and I have here a time meter, but Mrs. Kreker's presentation was quite thorough. Ministers, regional governor, MPs, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, prior to me starting, allow me to thank the organizers and mainly Mr. Luludis for his kind invitation to participate. That it is a conference that has become an institution that has transcended the local boundaries. It is of national size. Apart from that, it is very, very important for all of us who are suppressed with a daily micromanagement, take a step backwards and have a more macroscopic approach to things. We shall be able to trace strategies and policies. Studies and plans have been abundant in Greece, but what we lacked in Greece has been how we could include all these different projects into a common constituent towards a common direction and integrated plan. This is something that the government has been working on. You must have heard about the Committee of the Wise, Mr. Piskeridis, Mr. Vetas, and so on and so forth. Quite shortly, we shall have a very significant deliverable by those people. We need to build on that the minor strategies about the totality of our strands that will push forward Greek economy in the next day. Obviously, this will be used to absorb the biggest part of this hyper weapon, as Mr. Margaritis Hina said, this big weapon of 32 billion euros once negotiations are finalized at the level of the EU. As an introduction, allow me to tell you that our country in the last years is in a very crucial conjuncture. We have with us the big challenge of achieving dynamic, powerful pace of development to heal the wound of the crisis, to be able to march into the modern world in better conditions of prosperity, part of our wealth that was lost in the previous years. But this was not just about losing parts of our GDP, but also we saw a devaluation of our HR. There has been a big damage in the productive tissue of our country, and it is our obligation to do our best to recover this lost ground. With today's pace, or to be more specific, before crisis, that is, following a pace of 2%, according to a recent study of the OECD, our country will need 15 more years to go back to the levels before crisis, something that cannot be accepted, of course. It's our obligation to reverse that through a speedier pace of growth in the years to come, more than 3%. What our country needs is something that you all know. It takes investment, the productive approach is very important. 100 billion euros have been the gap of the crisis. Public investment, either it's about jointly financed projects or if it's about national investments, can cover a small part of these 100 billion euros. European resources are a very important source of money, of financing. They have come into the country. More than 60 billion euros have come into our country for the last 15 years. However, they cannot cover that gap. If we are talking about the national resources, then things are worse, because there are limited resources due to the budgetary limitations. We were obliged to follow that in the previous year, so things were tighter. What should we do now? What we must do is for these sources of financing to work in a complementary way. Either it's about national resources or NSRF or the Fund of Fair Transition or the Fund of Recovery, that is Anteportas, or profits from bonds, state bonds of the European Bank, the ANFAS, to include that into a common project. Now, I would like to respect the time and let me talk to you about the public investment, the National Public Investment Program. This law passed previous October as the NSRF and Cohesion policy were covered by Mrs. Mariano. Later on in the Q&A, I could make some remarks to complete what Mrs. Mariano said. Now, when it comes to the national plan and public investment, three remarks. First, the national resources are quite limited and the future size depends on the public budget. It is necessary to avoid fragmented efforts so that we can have a holistic approach and talk about complementarity or synergies between the different sources of financing. We need to implement an integrated enhancement plan, actions of added value that will increase competitiveness of Greek economy. Then, as I said before, we should match all these different resources of financing. This is the biggest challenge we have for the growth of our country in the day to come. These should be conceptualized, become more concrete, and talk about the names of different projects that will fuel a pipeline of projects. We can take that from those and we can turn them more mature. We will finance the necessary studies, because as you know, there's always need to do so. Studies that we are financing today may guarantee the next generation of works. Remark number two, which is a follow-up from the first one. We must see into the details the different program of public investment. Let me here make some remarks. In more than 20%, the included projects into public investment scheme are about actions that have a very low development growth footprint. Either this is about natural disaster or repeated actions, etc., etc. In our resources, we can see a stagnation of many projects. In our projects, we have 5,000 projects amounting to a budget of 27 billion euros. 550 out of those, that is 1.2 billion projects, are about the period 2009-2010. The remaining part of this 27 billion is 13 billion euros. We do include projects, this is quite right, but we must not forget about the project included in one programming period, because we should have a follow-up locally now. And I don't mean to be critical here. I don't mean rather to criticize anybody. This is valid for all regions. In Western Greece, we're talking about 318 projects. Mr. Farmakis might correct me. 39 out of those have zero payments in the last 4 years, and 42 have been listed in the national resources before 2016. Only 30% of payments in the Peloponnese, which is quite nearby. Out of 263 included projects, 20 have zero payments in the last 4 years, and 47 have been listed before 2016 with total payment less than 25%. Let us skip figures, though. There is something more substantial. The nature of the projects chosen to be financed by the national resources, in my view, is something quite debatable. Next to very important issues, such as the connection between a remote area to the central motorway, or the financed study, 2.5 million euros, about COVID-19 and traceability of antibodies. There are other projects which are quite debatable. For instance, in our national resources, I found a financing for an internet game of skills from one university. This is legal, yes, but we could discuss. A remark from the audience. A remark from the audience, please. Cannot be interpreted. Remark number 3, to come to the end. We can see the necessity to rationalize how the national resources work. What did we do? We introduced the National Growth Plan. To be fair, it is an initiative started by the previous government. For some reasons, this was not finalized. We brought some changes to that, some different modifications, and this passed. What are the main points? The main points of that, in my view, the following. First, we include a 5-year plan. Let us have a macroscopic approach. This program will start on January 1st, 2021, in order to go hand in hand with the new NSRF period and along with the new recovery fund, so there can be a feature of complementarity. Second, the national resources are here to strengthen different sectors based on 5 axes: smart recovery, digital transformation, green development, development of infrastructure, extroversion, and social development. More or less, these are the political targets that we have for the new NSRF. In the previous week, we submitted our proposals to the European Commission, and once this is finalized, we shall talk about the planning of minor sectoral programs or minor regional programs. To draft resources, we collaborated with EOV to have a better scientific documentation. Along with EOV, we collaborated, we used their studies as well as a first deliverable from the Committee of the Wise. We used equally that for NSRF. We're trying to have a common strategy when it comes to different sources of financing. A third feature is that we do have a new structure, a new management system that looks like the system promoted by the NSRF services. In spite of the justified critics, I should tell you that in my view, this is the best part of the Greek public administration. Point number 4, for national resources, we are given the possibility of special reserves. A first reserve that will be launched for sure will be a reserve about natural disasters. The budget up to now did not include natural disasters. This will be a totally different budget. And last but not least, point number 5, which is of paramount importance again, is that national resources have a devolution character, a character of growth. To put it simply, in other words, from now on, there will be no need for a person to come to our ministry, to our cabinet. The regional governor should not come to our office. All people, all mayors and regional governors will exactly know what the project is about, the exact budget. They can continue it, and we shall monitor the evolution of the project. Overall budget of natural resources under consultation that will be finalized next week. We had the obligation to have that open for 1 month's time. This is a debatable scenario. 10 billion euros for the years 2021-2027. Out of these, natural resources for Western Greece, we're talking about 30 130 million euros, and for the Peloponnese, 270 million euros. It seems double, but we have used the data foreseen related to the GDP, related to the population, related to the land. Yes, we are bigger in everything, says one person of the audience. The discussion is off microphone, something about the criteria of eligibility, apparently. So, since I'm out of time, but moderator, you said nothing to the minister about the time. Okay, anyway. Let me tell you a last point. National resources, in spite of the fact that they are smaller in size, they are very important. Besides, we're talking about taxpayers' money. We're here to contribute to the society, but we are net payers and net collectors. It takes respect, it takes attention, and if we use this money in a complementary way, then the totality of public investment could leverage in a decisive way the private resources needed to cover the investment gap. But as goes with every change, we talked about inertia before, a reform is necessary. Resources could be reformed, but we need regional governments and ministries to embrace that. Otherwise, it cannot deliver. I'm optimistic, though. We are obliged to be optimistic. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. Thank you, Secretary General. It's not very nice to moderate such a discussion because we're talking about something very important like public investment or the NSRF. I believe that the Secretary General has one of the most difficult endeavors in the government. We can see here that the development plans in our country could be rationalized, and there is a good starting point because we have diagnosed the problems. We know the needs. We believe that planning is of paramount importance in regional policy. We must talk about complementary actions, etc., etc. If we do not abide by principles, then we're talking about money wasted. I'm pretty happy because here we heard that a regional and development plan in our countries, at last, the different levels of regional governance may match, and we can cover the gaps. Now, I'm happy to give the floor to the host, the regional governor of Western Greece, Mr. Farmakis, to address the conference. I'm pretty sure, since he is the host, that he will abide by the timeline. I am here today to talk to you about something else, but you know, dialogue is quite nice, so I have many here triggers to intervene. So possibly, I will not follow my notes as a speaker related to the broader environment in the area and in the country. I will use some words. Mrs. Mariano talked about cohesion. This is a big word, cohesion. Cohesion is one thing, eligibility is another. So it's a criterion used throughout the process of going into cohesion. What's the purpose of cohesion? Not the one you alluded to, waste less or save money. Of course, we must save money. But the purpose is to converge, to be closer. It's not about how much money we spend. It's about cohesion, be closer one to the other. So Europe is talking about cohesion policies and struggles about cohesion policies. There are many arguments about cohesion, and I'm not a technocrat, you know, but I'm a lawyer. But I'm also a politician, to the speaker. I'm going to tell you the following. I think that up to now, and it's not bad, up to now in the whole negotiation, we participate using their own criteria, their own weapons, digital ones, smart ones, green ones, and so on and so forth. I don't mean that this is not substantial. On the contrary, but this becomes quite common. This is very bad, you know. This is problematic. If something is in vogue, this is problematic. So if we really need to talk about cohesion policies, we must see where we stand, what are the different characteristics, where others stand, and how can we catch up. Now, I'm not going to talk to you on behalf of our country, I'm going to talk to you on behalf of my region. We are in a region that all green, smart things are okay, but we need infrastructure. And I'm saying so in pain. We are lagging behind. It might sound absurd, but in 2010, Mr. Khan talked about smart specialization. But I was present here in that speech. It was as if he talked in Ghana about Android cell phones, because in Ghana they don't have potable water even. So you understand that in order to cover this gap, we must cover some other gaps first. This might be a discussion, a painful discussion. There will be different arguments, and there will be counter-arguments that they will tell us, you lost time. It was in the third program or in the second program. You didn't manage that well. You bad Greeks, lousy Greeks, etc., etc. Or rather, late 2019, I visited DG Regio in Brussels. I talked to Mr. Sleuters, claiming, because this is what we are doing, we are claiming, we, the regional governors, and we can become a bad spot. So I talked to him and I told him there is the need to finance natural gas from European resources in the period to come. It was as if I spoke to him in Chinese. He is Dutch, but he knows Greek. He is married to a Greek lady. He looked at me as if I were an alien. He told me, in my village in the Netherlands, I had natural gas. Yes, but I replied, in my village, we had no fireplace 40 years ago. We have different trigger points. This should be understood by everybody, by policy makers, both domestically and abroad. This is a big, big discussion. So for us, our first top priority is infrastructure. We are the region with the biggest rural network in the country. We are the region with different territories of many kilometers of rural motorway that has dust. Let us show what's in the situation in Crete or in northern Greece. So the infrastructure is not that good. We shall not find that kilometers of dirt roads. The 25% of the land irrigated is problematic. I don't mean to have a generalistic approach. No, we are the garden of Greece. Indeed, indeed. I don't mean to undermine the field of Larissa, for example, but Larissa is not that important because it has a field only. Here we have some specific characteristics. When we're talking about abundance policies, food-wise, it's very important to talk about the plain of Ilia, or the plain of Achaia, or the fields of Etolo-Carnania with edible olives, sheep and goats, etc. Plus the landscape, the natural environment. So we understand that Western Greece, I'm just talking about Western Greece, is lagging behind. To us, it can be only a priority. I'm pretty happy because I heard what the Deputy Minister said. I hope that we shall have a very close cooperation, but we must understand something that you said before. The agri-food sector is undermined. I would say that it's much debatable. At the same time, our policies and practical implementation are saying that we're undermining it. We are undermining it, but at the same time, they are saying that what's the end story? The end story that in the Netherlands right now, farmers are agronomists as well, by 80%, and in Greece, I don't know whether they have a proper education. This echoes reality. This echoes our future. We are saying that we're going to give some tools. What about the tools? It's not just about a closed network or a closed irrigation, but first of all, the farmer should become a savvy of the new tools and ways of production. Now, let me talk to you about what I heard by the Secretary General. Quite rightly, he said, he observed and made a remark. He said that in our region here, not only here, of course, I would say, we have included hundreds of projects that are stagnant since 2009. Yes, this is true. You know, the different projects on policies. Mr. Dean, you alluded to that. Yes, of course, it's about the plan, because plans are prepared by men, by human beings who follow policies. I will argue that as a newly born authority, we opted for respecting the program of public investment, rationalized through serious job done by our services. Aspects, purify the public investment program, get rid of unnecessary works, and save 96 billion euros for the program of public investment voted 2 months ago. For the first time in the very first year of a new mandate, we did so, and we shall include projects of 96 billion euros from the very first year of our mandate, because I saying so to empower you, Secretary General. These inclusions of these projects in our region became true in 2014 and in 2019 to an extent of 80%. Do you know what happened in 2014 and 2019? Pre-electoral years. This is quite eloquent when it comes to how we opt for one project. Now, we have selected, and we will materialize that, as I told you before, we have selected to include projects based on their maturity, a maturity that will guarantee absorption, execution, and will justify what people are waiting for. That is, a project is not just about what shall be produced, it's about the wealth that will enter society and jobs created, because this is what we lack. We are last in income per capita, but first in unemployment. So you understand that this is a top priority to us. NSRF. When it comes to NSRF, quite briefly, just 1 minute more, please. 1 minute more. Mrs. Kratza will take the floor straight away. Straight away. We have a lunch break, unfortunately. Is one comment? Let me tell you that in this tornado, in this storm of COVID, our region tried to do its best at the level of safeguarding health of citizens, respecting public money and the public investment program, with targeted inclusion of projects that touch upon the improvement of our sanitary map, ICUs only, hospitals only. And then we thought the following day already we have a specific plan related to specific pillars. First, support and enhancement of entrepreneurship. Total expenditure of 58 million euros. Remote services for health, total expenditure of 5 million euros. And actions to enhance social cohesion amounting to 5 million euros. You understand that, of course, this is under the approval of the Ministry of Development. We are ready. We are about to see the approval of our plan, which is complementary. We understand the need of complementarity of different measures taken vis-à-vis what the government has already announced or will announce shortly. We believe that this collaboration will bring the best result. Unfortunately, our generation was the one that should tackle many crises from 2009 onwards, and we shall continue up to now. We don't know what next it will bring. What we do know, though, is that we shall continue to love our homeland, having a specific plan and faith. Thank you so much for your attention. Indeed. We had the third crisis in 10 years' time. You're right. Thank you so much, Secretary General. Thank you, Regional Governor. I would like to thank you all. There is plan, there is a project, there is enthusiasm, of course. There is youth here in the room, invited to deliver for the generations to come. Unfortunately, I'm feeling some guilt, but we had a delay of 40 minutes. That is why I would like to invite all speakers to come forward, and at the end, if we have some time, to take questions. Okay? Nobody will leave, unless somebody has to leave now. Mrs. Kratsa, please. Mrs. Kratsa, please. Mr. Liarkovas. What about Mr. Galanos? Mr. Galanos, please. Mr. Dribetes, satellite connection or not? Mrs. Kratsa, you will know her. She has served our country through different posts. Now she is the regional governor of a very beautiful region, the Ionian Islands. Mr. Dribetas, I don't know whether there is a satellite connection. He will join us through the internet. He's a professor and dean of this Faculty of Social, Political, Financial Sciences at Demokritio University of Thrace. Mr. Liarkovas is a well-known professor from his to-the-point views into the public debate. Apart from an exquisite colleague at the University of the Peloponnese, he's the president of KEPE, that is the Center of Programming and Financial Research. He has also been president or the coordinator of the Scientific Committee, of the Budget Committee at the Hellenic Parliament. Mr. Giannis Psycharis, professor of Pantheon University and director of RDI, Regional Development Institute. And last but not least, Yorgos Galanos, professor at the Piraeus University, my colleague there, I know him. Mrs. Kratsa, you have the floor, please. So please, in order to give some opportunity for some questions, I would like to keep it short. Yes, even 1 minute at the European Parliament. So I'm quite brief. But in spite of that, I should thank deeply the organizers, Peloponnesus Journal, our dear journal, and my colleague, Regional Governor, Mr. Farmakis. I would like to tell you that I'm pretty happy to be here. I'm satisfied to be here, not just because this is a very important conference in a very difficult conjuncture for our country, but because I am a part of this world of Western Greece. I'm born, raised in Zante, with a reference city. I have Patras, the city of Patra. So I feel that I am home here. Apart from that, apart from this experiential, childish souvenir, Now, being a regional governor of the Ionian Islands, I discovered that we are a mega region. I'm talking about Western Greece, the Peloponnese, Epirus, the Ionian Islands. And one of the proposals that I would like to submit, in view of the different reps of the government and the competent Secretary General, Mr. Skalkos, all this planning, the planning that will aim at the bigger efficacy of existing and new expected resources, as well as the relaunch, the restart of our economy and our resilience vis-à-vis the crisis, the key would be inter-regional cooperation. It would be very important to include that into the broader planning of our country for the use of resources and for the drafting of different strategic plans. The Committee of the Wise could take that into account. Now, I would like to tell you that I believe very successful the motto of the conference, think global, grow local, because I believe that right now, especially right now, throughout the period of global crisis, we must realize that we should think global in order to understand where we stand as a country or as a region. Indeed, this worldwide crisis is a test for the global system. Globalization has proven that we cannot get rid of that. No village, no country can get rid of this on the globalized system. So the difficulty in which we are right now, tackling pandemic, relaunching the international activity and prosperity, is related to cooperation that the European Union will have with the people, with the G20, the worldwide organizations, and how can we better meet the goals of the EU. That is why we're talking about the cohesion story. It's not a coincidence, that previous speakers talked about cohesion. That is why I insist in that. Cohesion is a key because it failed in the previous years, in spite of the different tools that exist. This should concern us all to bridge this new gap successfully into a cohesion Europe. This is a big story for everyone, and this is something that we live, that we experience as elected regional governors. Cohesion in our country and in our regions. So it takes a replan, a restructuring of resources, politics, criteria, evaluations within the EU and domestically in each country. Now, in my hat as a resident governor, compared to my previous hat as an MEP, I would like to tell you that we must take into account the following. When Europe evaluates the efficacy of its resources and the efficacy of its regional policy, it should take more into account different conditions that prevail in each country. I have been a member of the Committee of Regional Development for many years, especially during the previous period when we drafted the new NSRF. We partnered with Greece for that, and for many years I have been a member of the committee responsible for the execution of the European budget. So I would like to tell you that through bigger intervention, the EU should monitor, or upon recommendations, they should guide the conditions prevailing in each country. Because me, as an MEP, I had a concern and I put pressure on everybody for more resources towards the regions in order to achieve convergence, both domestically and into the EU. Now, as a regional governor, I have resources, I should say, but I don't have the conditions to use the resources because we still have big bureaucracy, many laws, very lengthy procedures, and understaffed services. So, with this criteria, we can never use the resources that are there for us to take. Resources either from the new NSRF or from the new recovery fund. What I'm saying so is very important. I'm quite sad to admit that, because the only year that I didn't deal with the EU budget is this one. After 15 years in the European Parliament, this was the only year I didn't deal with the EU budget, because our top target in our country is institutional changes, administrative changes to become key players. Next thing is that we are an insular area. Mr. Skalkos, I said that we have resources. As an MEP, I struggled for more resources, involvement of regions, allocation of resources. Now, as a regional governor, I don't mind resources. And what puzzles me now are conditions to use resources. Knowing the vision of our Prime Minister, I do know that this should be your top priority, because we have lengthy procedure, bureaucracy, and understaffed services. These are the problems. These are our pains to achieve cohesion and convergence. Furthermore, let me tell you that we, regional governors, should also take into account the idea of convergence and cohesion into our areas. Being a regional governor of an insular area, this concerns me a lot, because we have cohesion problems in the area. Big, small islands between them have problems. So I'm pretty happy, because it was said that Greece has a targeted and proper insular policy, because this might affect the European Union that has not truly identified European cohesion, and we as a country, we should know what we need. Being now responsible for administration, being the head of an insular area, I'm sad, because we're not talking about insularity in a way that we could serve our own needs. It's a big step to take, a big positive step. The other thing that concerns us is the tourist policy. I'm pretty happy, because the Deputy Minister, Mr. Konsulas, with the scientific approach he took, of course, I'm talking about the need to have research, etc., which might seem dull, but you cannot have growth or any plan if you have no scientific data. So I'm pretty happy, because you mentioned that, and I will be more than happy to see that becoming a tool or a compass of our new policy on tourism. Let me tell you that in Europe, we Greeks, we are claiming an integrated tourist policy. Likewise, we must have an integrated tourist policy domestically, and we should have had a more integrated Ministry of Tourism, not depending on the NTO or on any other ministry. So, the integrated tourist policy in our country should be followed by an integrated Ministry of Tourism, but anyway, we must fight, you must fight, in order to have an integrated EU policy, because this will channel resources to cover special needs in the post-COVID era. It does not suffice to have fragmented policies that shall benefit tourism in different structures or in different points of infrastructure. But we must follow a targeted policy that will react vis-à-vis a crisis of tourism that proves to be quite vulnerable. At the same time, since I had a very important experience at the European level, having the experience of an integrated tourist policy. Let me tell you that this means something very specific. We must be ready for the needs, for the demands of an integrated policy from our country. You know pretty well that we lack in the education of personnel. We have certain gaps when it comes to the criteria to protect the environment, enhance the waste management procedure. There will be many more gaps, and many targets will be set that will put much pressure on us about tourism if we really talk about an integrated tourist strategy from the EU. We have every reason to serve these minor targets when it comes to the quality of development and tourism. Furthermore, I would like to tell you, and I will come to the end, in this era of fighting the pandemic and relaunching our economy worldwide, which is about our conference as well, we all want to invest in public health, for instance, and we all need to safeguard all different aspects of public health. Let me tell you that we should not skip other targets. For instance, digital transformation, green growth, the big targets set by the EU. These should be in the front line. Entrepreneurship as well. We as a country, we must defend ourselves through proper processes, through proper investment, because if this effort is not fair, which means connected to cohesion, then it may not be achieved. So I think that this is about regional policy, and Secretary General, I think that they should also be included into the post-COVID purposes. How can we have a fair achievement of all our targets? Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank the governor. She presented, we've seen her long experience. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to present all the insular policy and the blue development, the blue growth, and the blue tourism. I don't know, Mr. Grimbetas, who is here connected. My colleague, Mr. Grimbetas. All the speakers told us very interesting things. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time, so we have to be very concise, but I'm sure you will manage it.
Ελπίζω να με ακούτε όλοι. Υπόσχομαι να περικόψω αυτά που είχα πει ώστε κάπου να φτάσω. Με ακούτε όλοι?
Can you hear me?
Με ακούτε?
Can you hear me, says the speaker.
Με ακούτε, δεν ξέρω.
Can you answer me? Yes.
Πολύ ωραία.
I can hear you. You can start.
Λοιπόν, καταρχήν θα ήθελα να εκφράσω τα ευχαριστήριά μου και τα συγχαρητήρια στο διοργανωτή. Θεωρώ ότι είναι μια πάρα πολύ καλή προσπάθεια, ιδιαιτέρως καθώς προέρχεται από ένα σημαντικό και παλιό φορέα από την περιφέρεια. Να σας πω ότι είναι και εξαιρετικός ο χώρος στον οποίο βρίσκεστε. Ένας χώρος συνδεδεμένος με την οικονομική ιστορία όχι μόνο της Αχαΐας αλλά και της Ελλάδας ολόκληρης. Και να πω ότι ζηλεύω που είστε εκεί και εγώ πολύ μακριά σας. Λοιπόν, ξεκινώντας και προσπαθώντας να είμαι σύντομος, νομίζω ότι θα μετέφερα, θα κόμιζα γλάφκα στην Αθήνα αν έλεγα για τον ιστορικό ρόλο των δημοσίων επενδύσεων. Όντως, ένα μεγάλο μέρος από τη μεταπολιτική ανάπτυξη της Ελλάδας οφείλεται σε αυτές και στα πολλαπλασιαστικά φαινόμενα τα οποία προκάλεσαν. Θα ήθελα όμως κατά κύριο λόγο
I would like first to talk to you about this era and mention three main characteristics
πριν προχωρήσω σε
prior to me
σκέψεις για ότι
ending with some thoughts about the characteristics that should be adopted and where should we focus in the future. First of all, we come from a very important period. The budget of public investment throughout this period has been the one that we used, reducing that when we wanted to have a specific policy or when we wanted to meet the targets of the surplus. For the whole previous years, we saw that all budgets, in essence, came at a lower level vis-à-vis forecasts at the level of public investment. I think that we can understand why.
Όπου οι κοινωνικές ανάγκες είναι πολύ σημαντικές, συχνά προσπαθούμε να ενισχύσουμε την κοινωνική συνοχή.
We do start to enhance social cohesion through expenditure, but this expenditure should come from somewhere. In this case,
ίσως ήταν οι δημόσιες επενδύσεις.
This was our first priority. However, we must not forget about the fact that, likewise, to an extent, we had a delay in financial increase. A second issue that I would like to touch upon is how we can evaluate public investment. Frequently, when we're talking about it, we can evaluate the important role or not of an investment based on the size of it. This, what we don't say is the impact of that. Even if, when we're talking about it, there is a confusion between the result of implementing the investment with the result that this could bring to the economy. When talking about a street, for instance, we don't talk about the result, we're just talking about the size of the investment. If we talk about the result, we're talking about the multiplier effect coming from the implementation of the street, not what this street will bring for a series of years into the Greek economy. Let me tell you that this creates distortions. So we believe that an investment of some kilometers is more important than an investment of some hundreds of kilometers that would link a port to the motorway or to the railway system. In these cases, we distort the value of a public investment because one thing is the cost, another thing is the result that this can bring. The two different sizes are aligned, but some other times they are not. Moreover, let me tell you that we must evaluate public investment vis-à-vis their feasibility. I did the math and I saw that even if we don't talk about the latest period, Greece has been the champion in the bankruptcy of firms that have undertaken public works. Something like that may happen abroad, which is quite rare, but in Greece we are the champions in that. We have a big quantity, a plethora of these examples. Moreover, I would like to talk to you about the complexity of investment. 1 out of 2 euros of public investment goes to transport, and mainly the road transport. This can be justified, of course, because there is a relief in Greece. We are obliged to give away much money for our motorways. But this choice
τους οποίους θα έπρεπε να προσέξουν.
Keeps aside some other factors that should be
Το ενεργειακό δίκτυο της χώρας είναι αρκετά παροχημένο και
followed.
σίγουρα
For
θα έχει
instance,
σημαντικές
our
επενδύσεις.
motorway is quite obsolete and needed serious investment. Furthermore, I would like to mention soft investment, soft public investment. For instance, investment in innovation, technology, research, which is quite important. There is a paradox here. If we see the size of this investment, these investments are not few. They might reach the EU average, but on the other hand, we must see that their efficacy is quite low. The steps taken vis-à-vis these topics are quite limited, and indeed we are lagging behind compared to the EU average. In this sector, we must think of the efficacy and not absolute numbers, targeting and not money that we want to give away to that. Another important question, who shall invest? The central state. Then regions here have a significantly less important role. This is not a one-way street, of course. Even states that are very centralized, like France, regions do play a key role. Let us not talk about other examples like Germany, where indeed a very important part of public investment takes place from local governments. There is a logic here saying that the central state has a holistic approach. It goes before the government, and many times they repeat investments in a race of competition without any rational approach. We see neighboring regions to repeat investments without reaching the critical size that would render such an investment effective. This leads to a necessity of inter-regional cooperation, and not to the fact that regions should play a less important role in the future of public investment. A very important factor is that regions are closer to the reasons that lead to the necessity of an investment, of a public investment. On the other hand, it takes cooperation between them so that frequently they can reach the critical size that may lead to the efficacy or not of any public investment program. Another important point to talk about, as you see, Chair, I'm trying to be brief. Another point is about resources that we can allocate to them. Lately, I'm under the impression that there has been a rumor about millions or billions that will give the chance to our country to create another investment opportunity. A big part of this investment, a big part of this capital, rather, is about public investments equally. This approach is not erroneous. Indeed, during the last period, we know that in the next 7 or 8 years, there will be available for our country some significant sums of money that could lead into another logic, into another development footprint for our country. Yet, I think that we must not overdo it and be super optimistic. Greece is a country that quite shortly will have a debt that will be 200% of its GDP. I believe that this may lead into a monitoring of the markets and the institutional bodies of the EU in a way that it may deter any logic that would put in doubt budgetary balances. This is quite restrictive vis-à-vis public investment. I'm deeply sorry, but we have to move on. You are quite right, but we have other speakers from the next panel, so we must come to the end. 5 minutes. No. We don't have. 1 minute. We have 3 more speakers and we have the panelists from the next panel. I would like to say that we are in need of a inter-regional plan of public investment. Quite frequently, I believe that the closets of the regions are full of different plans that have stayed in paper. We need a substantial plan that will be feasible, that will be effective and realistic. Thank you so much, Angelos. Thank you, Evangelos. Thank you. It was very interesting. I may not comment on that because we have the members of the next panel, unfortunately. So thank you so much. Thank you, and I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for this violent interruption. Now let me give the floor to our next 3 speakers. My next 2 speakers will understand me, but I need to welcome the next session speakers. Secretary General, Mr. President, you're here. Mr. Yargovas, go ahead. President of KEPE, please, keep it short. Keep it short, please. Thank you. I would like to thank the organizers of this meeting. Thank you. I see that here there is another Delphi forum of a similar size, like the Forum of Delphi. Here we have the Patra Forum. I will get to the gist of that. The tone and the intervention are related to structural funds. And I'm going to talk to you about the other side of structural funds, not the usual aspect of it. The pretext of that was that since 1981, when we joined the European Community and then EU, throughout this whole year we have gotten more than 100 million euros to enhance different efforts. Yet, in spite of this huge amount of money that came to our country, in 2009, our country did not manage to be well protected vis-à-vis a worldwide economic crisis. Let me tell you that throughout these years, before 2009, we saw uncontrolled expenditure. We had cheap borrowing, non-implementation of structural reforms, but this left our country exposed to the worldwide crisis. In 2009, when we had the beginning of the financial crisis, there was an opportunity to look backwards and re-evaluate this whole experience we had in the EU, among other things, of course. Comprehend failures, learn how we can avoid similar errors, that is, be well equipped. We didn't do so, though. The second opportunity is today, 2020, combined to a huge package discussed before, which will amount to 62 billion euros for the next period. What Brussels are doing and national authorities, to an extent, is that they are drafting a big number of studies evaluating the immediate impact of structural funds. They are measuring results based on some indicators, how many kilometers of road networks were built, how many new businesses were built, how many people were specialized, how many jobs were created. So evaluation focuses on activities or actions that are taking place through the support of the community, which otherwise would not have taken place. There is another side though, another aspect which is more blurry. It is this aspect that, apart from this positive impact, of course this is positive, we need to find these factors and see the factors that seriously undermine the efficacy, not just the absorption, the efficacy of actions. A series of problems referred frequently into these alternative studies is something related to the institutional framework. There is a low capacity of planning. Rigid bureaucratic procedures and lack of experienced personnel are the factors that hinder us to achieve results. Corruption made things worse. Many times, the European Organization Against Fraud, OLAF, has discovered many issues of corruption. The Court of Auditors ruled that some part of the payments shouldn't have taken place. This doesn't mean fraud by necessity. It's a common knowledge nowadays that a big part of financing of the EU has been wasted into useless seminars, into remuneration and construction projects that were never finalized. It's known that the biggest waste of money in Greece was a tunnel that was never finalized. Next to the big success stories, yes, there is a series of big failures. Why did that happen? The reason is very simple. Structural funds may be considered easy money. It's about money coming from the outside, coming from abroad. A continuous flow of easy money is the perfect way to preserve a bad structure of governance and enhance corruption. Regional authorities, based exclusively on this money, do not have any incentives to seek better ways to increase development projects. Structural funds may strengthen more bureaucracy, paternalistic structures, and clientelism. Last but not least, structural funds have a serious impact on the incentives of workers. In 2003, March 27th of 2003, there has been an issue of Economist published. Back then, the Economist alluded to a Greek official saying, I quote, "Whoever works hard in any work in Greece is an idiot, possibly." Given that it is easier to have a European program and enjoy the European subsidies. More than 68 years ago, the first big investment project for modern history, the Marshall Plan, has been of paramount importance to support the post-war reconstruction of Greece. And I'm saying so because the resources that are anti-importance are similar to the Marshall Plan. But back then, the Marshall Plan has been targeted, specific, contrary to the constant allocation of resources in the EU. It's not a coincidence that the capital of the EU have been considered as something that we should take, and not just a way to support domestic efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, the President of the and also that he was very concise. Next time, director and professor are at Bantu University. ladies and gentlemen, dear delegates, I would like to thank you for this invitation. And I will tell you that I respect time, and thanks to the presentation, we'll go quick. Public investments is a major subject. It's a very important academic matter, but we have to say that public investment is an important tool for growth, for the promotion of growth. And public investments can adapt to the crisis. According to that, let's see what have been done in these sector. Public sector investments were not valorized in Greece. Not only in Greece, but in Europe in general. We have a great reduction.
Now, what's the reason for that? Due to the limitations that were set when it comes to the fulfillment of different goals and when it comes to the different programs of convergence. This reduction transcended all the different sectors, all the different items and all regions in our country. Can we say that in a snapshot? Yeah, this is it. So we can see that after 2008, public investment decreased systematically. If one studies in a macroscopic way public investment, one could see that public investment in a crisis where the fewer public investments in the post-junta or the post-war era. When we're talking here about public investments, we're talking about national and co-financed. As you see here, the dark blue is the national one up to 2004. This is a big participation of the national ones. Then the participation of the national is decreased in 2015, continues up to now with some recovery, Secretary General today. Now here, what's the point behind the big participation? Olympic projects. The Olympic projects were projects financed exclusively by national resources. This had an impact on all different categories of public investment. I'm not going to make any reference to that, but public investments have a big range of application. The private sector, for instance, in industrial zones, in infrastructure, transport, infrastructure of tourism, infrastructure related to healthcare, and public healthcare system, etc., etc. What was this reduction? This was two phases of the economic circle. The ascending circle to the right, increase of public investment. That is in favor of the circular economy during the ascending phase of the economic circle, and in favor of the circular economy during the descending phase. We did the opposite vis-a-vis the economic theory. Why did we do so? If you are able to see the snapshot, we had the participation. We participated in the organization of that as an RDI. So this is the image of regional imbalance in our country between the EU and Greece. You see the different curves here. EU on the rise, and Greece is dropping. The gap between Greece and the EU for the last decade increased greatly. This gap is even bigger at the regional level today, and Mr. Loudis was quite impressed at it. Today, no region in Greece, no region has a development level more than the EU average, or to put another way, all regions in Greece, including Attica, have a development level less than the EU average. And of course, here we can see that Attica has a difference compared to other Greek territories. For instance, the North Aegean. Is it a Greek story? No, it's a European story. And why is that? Because the development map in Europe is quite polarized. The regions that have a development level more than the EU average are the blue ones. In essence, it's a corridor within the EU. that enjoys a development level more than the EU average. The remaining European regions, let's take France, for instance. Let's take the UK, for instance. I'm not talking about the European South. I'm not talking about the Eastern Europe states. There are regions having a lower performance than the EU average. So there's something wrong with cohesion in European integration. Why am I saying so? To conceptualize my thought, because if we don't solve the issue of convergence and development at the European level, we cannot talk about any European integration. This is my view. This is my academic view. Consequently, public investments are the catalyst for development. Development is given by the productive sector, which is of paramount importance in every country. Yet, the fewer participation of the state does not mean minor contribution, because the state sets the tone. It might become the catalyst, yes, and set the tone, or it can also leverage more resources. Public investment as a percentage of GDP are 3%, whereas public investments are 40%. So public investments are a fraction of public expenditure in Greece. This fraction may deliver at the European level as well. So we cannot put the blame on public investment about the derailment budget-wise. This doesn't mean that we should not organize public investment in an organized way. Yes, but this is not a waste of money. The cohesion policy may fuel different parts of our policy. National resources should become part of an integrated and complementary planning, yes, you're right about it, in order to achieve the better possible result. The recovery fund resources is a big challenge for the increase of public investment. One could argue that it would be a challenge to increase that by 50%. If we are talking about 60 billion euros, we are talking about 6 billion euros per annum. This means double investment if we absorb money and time. We're talking about doubling public investment. That would be a very inspiring target. Yet, this is a challenge lying ahead. Last but not least, if we use the cohesion policy funds, we must focus on regional expertise. We need regional expertise so that we can use the comparative advantages to the benefit of the local and the national development, as well as to the benefit of cohesion at the European level. Thank you so much for your attention. This was very interesting, Yanis. Thank you. Let me add that in our country, in OECD, the 60% of public investment is taken place by local authorities, first and second level. In Greece, it's less than 20. So there is a big problem of central state. This is an issue that we must see in our country. Mr. Galanos, since you were my student, if you speak for 1 minute, you shall take it all. So the winner takes it all. Let's see. I will try to be as brief as possible. First of all, thank you so much for the invitation to participate in the conference. As the regional governor said, I will not follow my slides. Unfortunately, I will elaborate on some references. For instance, the next NSRF. Only one slide about it. This is the course from the Mediterranean project up to now. Our country has taken some money. If you add it up, this shows the strategy followed. I believe, rather, it seems that we're not sure about the success of this added value of the projects that have taken place. We talked about the committee of Pisaridis and the 32 billion euros. Okay, why not? We shall welcome that. And next NSRF, and since it should be combined in 2 years' time, a huge leverage for our country, European money that is. I'm not sure that if we follow the structures and the way of how this has been created by Europe, we can have the better performance available. The Secretary General quite rightly said, for the first time we have a national framework when it comes to public investment program. Do you want us to speak about the previous years? Do you want us to speak about the motorways expanded according to where voters live? The public investment program became a part of a payroll. So if we really need to talk about strategy, we must holistically approach it and see 16 to 24 months the contractualization time of an NSRF project in our country. That is, we can plan today. If we don't have a study for the first time, we must acknowledge that studies have entered the game after 2 support frameworks 9 months ago. If we don't have any study in our hands, the average time for a study and implementation 36 months. Then the contractualization time, if we add it up, then we are going into the next programming period. We end up with discussion about absorption, and at the end of each day, we're talking about absorption problems, but we don't talk about the added value. However, without further ado, all this is related to how you can plan your structure. And then this is also related to regional development. Either we like it or not, national development is not regional one at the same time. So we must rather equip regions with tools. If we really need a holistic national development, we should have a serious regional development. So let us stop planning about community frameworks that lack plan, and let us not talk about a panacea for regions. If you see the planning, you shall see that each time there are guidelines, there is consultation, but what about the final plan? The same throughout Greece. So Mykonos and Santorini have the same needs with Patra. So there is here a field to tackle. In front of us, we have a very important opportunity to have a budget that is bigger, an unprecedented one, and we must give the tools. There is experience. I'm not going to specialize that even further. 4412, the law 4412, changes in planning, maturity of projects, free studies based on specific institutional framework. So there is the proper experience, the proper expertise, there is know-how in the regions. Let us listen to the new mindsets. If we believe that strategies, I wouldn't say failed, had some errors, let us listen to the newly proposed structure. Thank you. Quite on time, always abiding by what your teacher is telling you. First of all, let me thank you all for your participation. Thank you for being so patient. I would like to thank my speakers. We had reps from the central political scene, the central administration, the regional administration. We had reps from research institutes, universities. I believe that we had a very fruitful dialogue, and we shed light on many different issues of our thematic. Very interesting ideas and proposals were heard to resolve problems, fix issues. The conclusions that I draw, and I believe that this is important. It's not about money. I agree that we are struggling to get much money from the European fund, but what is important is how we can use it. If we have 12,000 projects, nothing will be done. Where shall we focus on? This is the most important thing. And I think that this has been a very fruitful conclusion. I'm pretty happy because regionally and centrally, upon 4635 law, we are moving towards the good direction in spite of the third crisis. We are leaving this room in an optimistic tone. There are people that work and will deliver. Unfortunately, no more time left. We Apologies from the previous panel and apologies for this huge delay. Thank you.